Welcome into the latest episode of the Unpaid Interns. Austin Render here with you on Monday, October 5th. A great week of guests lined up and a great way to start it off with a former Hoosier, my good friend Josh Eastern, joining the program here on a Monday morning. Josh, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Oh, we're happy to have you. Happy to pick your brain a little bit about your time in the industry. We'll start it off with what you've been up to lately. What has 2020 looked like for you?
Well, of course, with like everybody, it's been a little bit weird, but I feel like I'm one of the fortunate ones because the league that I work for has come back in full force. I'm calling games right now for the United Soccer League Championship and in League One. Of course, the league started back in March, played one weekend, got put on hold until basically middle of July, and I've been back since the middle of July calling games every weekend and during the week, and super fortunate to be able to be doing so.
Now you've been calling games from a studio, correct? That's
Yeah.
that's so that's nothing terribly new for you. What's kind of been the adjustment since you went to this job and you've had to call games from the studio? Because a lot of people are having to do that now. It's kind of the
Right.
norm of 2020. What are some of the adjustments you have to make as a broadcaster?
I mean, whatever you see, pretty much. I mean, we have some booths upstairs. I'm actually sitting in one of our booths downstairs right now. It's just basically a TV, an audio box, and a headset. So whatever you see on your screen is pretty much all I'm seeing as well. There's some booths where we have kind of a quad box of all of our other cameras, but for the most part, whatever you're seeing, I'm seeing. So my kind of rule of thumb is if it's on the screen, I'll call it. If it's not on the screen, I'll just kind of lay out and let the pictures kind of tell the tale. But that's kind of the biggest adjustment is you can't really look down the bench and see like, oh, somebody's warming up down the side or the coach is doing this or that. It's just kind of whatever's on the screen, that's what you have to call. And it definitely was an adjustment, but I think I've gotten adjusted to it at this point.
You wear a lot of hats. You work for the USL Championship League, the League One,
Yep.
CONCACAF. Just kind of detail what your job has entailed since you took it and kind of how it's evolved in the couple of years you've been there.
Yeah, so I am, of course, calling games for USL, like I was talking about. We do so in this office. It's called Vista World Link down here in basically Miami, Florida, just north of Miami. Um, so this office like basically brings in all of the content for American soccer and CONCACAF. So MLS, NWSL, the USL, CONCACAF, it all comes through us. And of course, I'm calling games for, I've done Champions League, CONCACAF Champions League, CONCACAF League, which is like the equivalent to Europa League. Um, we do a bunch of kind of under 20 tournaments, under 15 tournaments for CONCACAF. We do MLS World Feeds actually through here as well. I've done NWSL. So it's been pretty cool to kind of see myself in a bunch of different leagues. And actually my, I guess, quote unquote, day job is I work in what we call the DMC, which is basically the hub of all the content where we archive every single game, every melt. So basically every game in American soccer that happens comes through our office. So it's kind of more than I thought it was going to be. So it's more than just calling games. That's kind of my side job or day job, however you want to call it. But it's been an absolute blast so far.
I know you've been a soccer guy ever since I met you. Where did the love for the game come from?
That's a good question because growing up, I played soccer going until I went to high school. I stopped. I played baseball through high school. Honestly, I can't really tell you too much because it just kind of happened organically. I lived in Seattle. Of course, the Sounders came around in 2009. Um, I think that kind of sparked it because you saw the sound. I mean, the Sounders are one of the most successful teams in MLS history, and they've only been around for now 11 years. It's pretty remarkable. But I think seeing that and kind of seeing that soccer culture and then going to Indiana, I swear, I had no idea I'd be covering the soccer team for basically all 4 years. I got actually super fortunate. My sophomore year, I was supposed to cover just women's basketball, and I really wanted to cover men's soccer. But a couple people ahead of me in the ranks at the IDS decided to move on to Inside the Hall, and somebody else went somewhere else. So, and it worked out that I kind of fell into that slot of working men's soccer. And I was like, I don't want to give this up. This one, I want this to be my beat. So I kind of followed them for all 3 years, my final 3 years at the IDS and the Hoosier Network, of course. And just kind of fell into soccer in the end of it. And I absolutely loved it.
Well, your love has rubbed off on several of us as well. I will definitely say that. Let's go to your time at IU. What stands out to you in terms of the memories that you made, the experience you got at Indiana? What's the main, like the biggest things you took away from your 4 years there?
I mean, definitely my two favorite things that I did were cover men's soccer and cover and broadcast the Little 500. Far and away, those were the two top things. It's probably 1A and 1B. I don't know which is 1A and which is 1B. I loved them so much. But I'll talk about Little 500 for a minute, because that community and that kind of environment around that race with the racers, with the alumni, it's the most unique thing I've ever seen. And it actually kind of has some parallels to the men's soccer program, because that alumni base always comes back. They're always talking about Indiana. They're always saying good things. Whenever I'm just around this office and talking with other color commentators, they always mention, oh, you went to Indiana, so you must know the Yeagleys. And everybody knows the Yeagleys. Everybody loves the Yeagleys. But it's just kind of that community around Indy. I mean, it goes throughout all sports, I think, at IU, but that community is so tight. Everybody really loves IU. Those alumni always want to come back, and they're always willing to talk and to help people. And it's truly just a special community there.
How does a kid from Washington end up at Indiana?
And then all the way down here in Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been kind of a weird journey, but it's been a fun one. So first and foremost, my mom went to Indiana. So
Yes,
I had
yeah.
that connection. She's from the Midwest, from Ohio. So I had that connection out there. I also had a bunch of cousins that went to Indiana at the time I was looking. So then I went to Bloomington with my mom, toured around the campus, toured actually the old journalism school at Ernie Pyle Hall, because Franklin Hall wasn't complete yet. And I was like, oh, this is pretty cool, like the IDS, WIUX. And then I kind of started talking with just some other people around there, and they're like, yeah, we're going to move into the Franklin Hall. There's going to be a media school. And I was like, all right, like this is pretty cool. It was between there and kind of Missouri. I looked at Missouri, wasn't too high on that. Maybe Colorado Boulder, but I was like, nah, I think I want to go to Indiana. I have some cousins there. My sister ended up going there as well. She's a senior now. So I just kind of fell into it, absolutely loved it. And it was one of the best decisions I've ever made.
You were a part of that transition to Franklin Hall from the Ernie Pyle Journalism School. What has that done in your mind, getting a couple of years at the media school now? What has that done for the school, for the program, to have its own specialized building?
Absolutely. Oh, it's absolutely huge. And that building, you know it, it's state of the art. It's absolutely incredible. Beckley Studio, the whole IDS newsroom now kind of there in the back. But it's remarkable, because the journalism school was basically just journalism. But now in 2020 and past couple of years, it's not just journalism. You have to have a podcast studio like Franklin Hall does. You have to learn how to work a camera. You got to learn so many different things. Like we use the Adobe Cloud, or like the Adobe production suite here at my office, and knowing kind of just those basic skills is so important. And having access to all that, having that computer lab downstairs with all those Macs and everything, it's state of the art. And the staff is very willing to help you. Of course, Galen Clavio is one of the best in the business as well. Just everything about that environment really helps you and prepares you for the kind of that next step.
You mentioned all the different things that you can do there, and you did them while you were here. I mean, you kind of wore every hat you could. How important is that in this industry, to get everything in college, to get all this experience as a photographer, a videographer, a writer, a journalist, just in general? How important has that been for you, maybe in the job market initially, and then for your job now?
I think it's almost more important for the job market, because when I was kind of going through college, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, because I did a lot of writing, especially going into college. But then when I got there, I was like, I don't really know what I want to do. And it wasn't really until I found this job and I was like, all right, I guess I'll be a broadcaster, because I was still looking for whether it be content positions, or even, I mean, I don't know if I necessarily want to work at a newspaper, but something along those lines. But it's kind of like when you're in high school and you play a lot of sports and you're not sure which sport you want to play. you should still play all those sports because it's good and it'll help you become a more well-rounded person, whether that be on the court, on the field, whatever you're wanting to do. I kind of equate that to getting into this business, because now if you're a social media person, you need to know how to work Twitter, Instagram, all of those things. You need to know how to work probably the Adobe Cloud, whether that be or Final Cut. You need to know how to work a camera. You need to do you need to know so many different things now in 2020. Those multimedia positions are very important, and there's a lot of them out there if you can find them. So just having that basis, even just at a ground level, is so important, just so you can kind of spread yourself across many bases.
And not only that, you also, I mean, you're a soccer guy now. I focus primarily on soccer, but you broadcasted about every sport that IU offered while you were here. And what have those sports done for you? I mean, obviously you're only doing soccer, but there's definitely
Mhm.
things I'm sure that you can take from broadcasting Little Five, from broadcasting basketball that you've been able to use for soccer.
Absolutely. I mean, our Little 500 broadcast was one of the most like full productions that IU does probably on a year to year basis, especially when radio TV got it. So just having that experience of being in kind of that big broadcast position was so important. And then, I mean, you just need to have those broadcasting skills, and being able to do football on the radio, do basketball for BTN Student U and the radio as well. It's so important. And just kind of like I was saying in the last question, being able to do multiple things is so important, because I mean, I love soccer, but it'd be great if I could do college basketball down the road or do football down the road. So just having that experience to say, yeah, I did that a while back, or I was a sideline reporter for one game on a BTN Student U broadcast, that can help you. Because I was asked a few weeks ago, have you done sideline? I'm like, yeah, I've done it once. So if you want me to do it, I'm down to do it. I don't know if that'll come to be, but it's just kind of one of those things that you just never know what's going to come up. And if you can say, yeah, I've done that, somebody's going to say, yeah, maybe this might be a good spot for you, as opposed to somebody who's like, yeah, I've never done sideline. And then you're like, all right, next person. At least they can think about you a little bit, and then you can kind of go from there.
2 years in the industry now, officially out of college industry. What are
Okay.
some of your biggest takeaways from the profession, the job market, that somebody who is trying to follow behind you might need?
That's a really good question. My biggest thing would just be to treat everyone with respect. I know that sounds so simple, but just doing that extra little thing, being just a little bit more positive than the next person, treating your producer with respect, treating your color commentator with respect. That's the biggest thing. It's a networking industry. You know that, everybody knows that coming up. If you leave a positive impression on people you work with, you're more likely to get recommended down the road. And that's kind of the biggest thing I've tried to come in with is, we work crazy hours here. So we're basically a Remy studio. So it's kind of a reduced workforce, because we can do multiple games on one night, because we don't have to be in different spots. We can go from basically 201 to 202 and do a game in Louisville, and then do a game in Phoenix, which I've done already this year, which is kind of weird. But it's that private jet. You get on that really quick and you get over
Mm-hmm.
to Phoenix, huh? But yeah, I mean, just being able to respect people who you work with, leave a positive impression, is so important, because that'll help you down the line for sure.
You're spoiling everyone's thoughts. They're like, man, how did he get from Louisville to Phoenix so
I know.
quickly?
Sorry, I know.
You're
Cat's out of the
spoiling the
bag.
magic. Well, take me back to your senior year, and you talked about it a little bit with your mindset of not knowing what you wanted to do. What was kind of your process going into, okay, I have to get a job here pretty soon? Like, what
Yeah.
what was kind of your thought process?
Well, I went into it and I was kind of unsure when that would come around, because when I was looking into getting into broadcasting, I was like, oh, I'll probably have to go through minor league baseball, because that's just kind of one of those natural paths of most broadcasters. It seems like go the minor league baseball route. I would have been fine with that. It would have been great. But you never know where you're going to find a job. And I'll kind of tell you how I got this job. It was
Hmm.
super random. I was at home on winter break. I was just in my room searching on. I basically typed in play-by-play jobs into Google, came across Indeed.com. It was probably on the 4th page of just searching. It said soccer play-by-play. I clicked on it. I applied. Shortly thereafter, I heard back. I was like, all right, this is great. I was like, I don't know if I want to sign yet. And they were kind of hesitant to sign me right away as well. So I was like, all right, that's fine. So I waited a couple months, reached back out. They were like, yeah, we're interested. Let's do it. I was like, all right, I'm in. So you never know how it's going to come about. Everybody has their own, I know this is kind of cliche. Everybody has their own path. Everybody has their own story, but that's honestly how it is. I didn't know how it was going to come to be. And in this industry, people are saying, oh, you probably won't get your first job until after graduation. You'll be unemployed when you graduate. I'm like, all right, whatever, that's fine. I felt like I was one of the fortunate ones. I was hired in February of my senior year. I feel like that's abnormal a little bit. So I don't know how that necessarily was going to work out for everyone, but I'm just maybe a little bit lucky, and you also need a little bit of luck. And I know that's probably not the answer a lot of people want, but I mean, that's just how it works. It's so weird, this industry, and especially now in 2020 with the pandemic, things are getting thrown all around. So yeah, but to have this job, I'm so fortunate to have it, and it's been a fun journey in this year and a half so far.
Who have you kind of looked at growing up as a broadcaster, or someone who, once you started and realized it's something you wanted to do? Are there professionals that you kind of tried to model yourself after, mentors that you worked with? How have you tried to keep yourself sharp with other people's input?
Yeah, so growing up, I grew up in Seattle. If you don't know me, I'll tell you all about it. Happy to
Oh
tell you all
yeah,
about that.
let's get the whole bio here on Josh
Yeah,
Richard.
no, I don't need to go into that. But there were a lot of really good broadcasters in Seattle. One of them worked for the University of Washington. Name was Bob Rondo. He was a really big influence on me growing up. Met him a couple times when I was pretty young, and just like, hey, like I'm Josh. I'm like a little 10-year-old kid. But I listened to him growing up every single Saturday. I went to Washington football games, so we'd hear him on the post game show, and I was like, man, like Bob Rondo's awesome. A couple other guys in Seattle, Dave Niehaus, who actually went to Indiana. He's from the Midwest. He passed away a couple years ago, but he was a fantastic broadcaster for the Mariners. Kevin Calabro, also, he did Sonics games. He did the Blazers recently. He did some ESPN radio. So those three were really big for me. And then as I kind of got into the industry a little bit more, I wanted to reach out to some people. And one guy I came across, who've actually had on a Hoosier Network podcast, is Aaron Goldsmith. He works for the Mariners right now. He's their radio and TV guy. He kind of mixes between both. So those few people, they all have relationships to Seattle. But I've been able to talk with Aaron back and forth. He's been able to give me some good advice. And those other three have kind of molded me into kind of who I want to be as a broadcaster. I listen to them a lot. Bob Rondo and Kevin Calabro actually are now out of the industry, at least for now. Kevin Calabro is. And I guess on a more national scale, I love listening to Ian Eagle. He's great at what he does. Kevin Harlan as well. So on a national scale, I know people may not be able to relate with those people from Seattle, but Kevin Harlan and Ian Eagle are kind of those two national guys who I'd really love to listen to.
Some good names there, everyone. Listen to those people. Josh knows what he's talking about. I mean, Kevin Harlan and Ian Eagle, those guys are, I would agree, that was who I kind of linked to early. Those are some really good people. I mean, what do they do well that you have tried to implement in your, I mean, they do everything well, but what have you tried to implement in your own style?
I mean, Kevin Harlan on radio, I mean, he does the Super Bowl on radio. That should tell you enough. I mean, he's probably one of the best, or the best football radio announcer out there right now. Absolutely fantastic. Ian Eagle, he does radio as well. I honestly think he's a little bit better on TV. That doesn't demean him at all as a broadcaster. He's still a fantastic broadcaster on radio or TV, but I listen to him on TV, especially when he does basketball, when he does football, and getting up for those big moments is so important. I know kind of those big moments is how you're going to be remembered as a broadcaster. So getting up for those and being prepared, being ready for those, and just kind of letting the moment breathe, but also adding your input as well while not stepping over the moment and making it yours, because that's not what you're there to do. You're basically there as a broadcaster to caption what is happening and to make it more interesting. I was actually, when Brian Anderson came to Indiana, he told us a great tip. I think it was on one of our podcasts. He said there's the 3 S's of broadcasting: stories, stats, and silence. Those 3 things are kind of the cornerstone of how I try to broadcast. I try to bring interesting stories. I try to be statistical, but not too overbearing. And then something I've worked on lately is silence, because during a soccer game, it's not always going back and forth. Sometimes they're just kicking around the back, kicking it through the midfield. It's not very exciting. You don't need to talk. And I know without crowds, that can be kind of tough because it's just dead silent, but you don't need to be talking the entire time. So that's something I've kind of tried to work into my broadcasting a little bit, just to see kind of how it works. And I think it takes a little bit of getting used to, but I think it's kind of getting there.
I think for people who may not know the difference, I think it's important to talk about it. I mean, we do both radio and TV here at IU. You're predominantly TV now. You
Mhm.
talk about the silence aspect of things when you're on TV. What are some of the biggest adjustments going from radio to TV?
The radio, the number one thing is you have to paint the picture. That's kind of a cliche thing to say, but that's exactly what it is, because obviously nobody can see what's going on. On TV, the pictures kind of tell the tale, and that's when I mentioned captioning, that's kind of what you have to do. You don't need to describe every little thing that's happening, like, oh, he kicks it up the right, now he's going to try to turn into the box, and now he's going to take the shot, and now he's going to do this. You don't really need to say that. You can kind of say, and now he turns, and now he shoots, because they're kind of seeing the picture. But when you're on radio, you have to be saying everything that's happening and painting that picture. I think baseball radio is kind of the best thing to kind of describe it, because obviously they can't see what's happening. Baseball is so unique in the fact that there's different pitches, so many different things are happening. There's people all over the field. So you kind of have to be there to say what's going on, to say how things are happening, and to describe it in a way that is interesting and engaging, that'll bring that listener in.
All right, let's talk a little current sports. You're a big sports guy, big
Okay.
soccer guy, Josh
Yep.
Eastern. Your thoughts of everything overseas with their resumption back in the summer, and as they resume the new season here in the fall. Everything feels like it's going pretty well. What have you thought of their resumption?
Yeah, I mean, everything in Europe right now sounds much better than it is here. But going back just to May, when the Bundesliga came back in Germany, that was awesome. I did a trip to Europe back in December, saw some games in Germany, absolutely fell in love with that league. So I was super into it right away. They were the first to come back, and people, I think, were very skeptical of how this is going to work. If there's one positive test, is going to shut the whole league down. But they were absolutely flawless with their planning, with everything that went into it. It was absolutely perfect, and then that kind of gave a pathway for the Premier League to come back and a few other leagues around Europe to come back. And then the Champions League came back in August. That was an awesome kind of just 2-week tournament that kind of played out. Usually it's, of course, 2 legs back and forth, but that was so cool to watch, that just those one-legged affairs where, I mean, PSG almost lost to Atalanta, but then they made the final, and that was super fun. But I think they've been absolutely great with it. It's been super tough on the players, especially coming back into this season, because I know they had that long break back in April and May, but coming back into it's tough to get back into full fitness, because you got to run. It's probably upwards of 7 or so miles each and every game. I mean, that's a lot of running, and you can't really do that when you're stuck inside your house or apartment. So now kind of the fixture congestion is coming in, and that's when you're going to see some weird results, like you saw yesterday in the Premier League, with Liverpool losing 7-2, Tottenham winning 6-1. I know you're happy about that result. But it's made for some really engaging soccer and some really fun storylines. And this season could be one of the weirdest ones yet, but I'm really, really looking forward to it. It's been great to at least have some sort of normalcy, be able to turn on the TV at 9:30 Eastern and watch some Bundesliga, lead right into some Premier League, and then have that go until about 2 p.m. So it's in that aspect, it's been absolutely fantastic, and I've loved waking up just to watch that.
I agree. It has been. It feels normal to know there's a Tottenham game on at some point on the
Exactly.
weekend. And yes, I was. Yeah, I enjoyed every second, all of the
As you
90
should.
minutes
As
yesterday.
you should.
Um, Your thoughts on they put these new handball rules out at the beginning
Yeah.
of the season, and they've already had to walk them back. I mean, what do you think of that? Quickly having to bring them back to scale.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of saw in the first 2 weeks of the Premier League how that went, and it
Yeah.
wasn't great. I was just watching NBC. They do a great job with their coverage, but like
Mhm.
Rebecca Lowe, she's not too out there in with her takes, but she was out there. She was like, "This is not good." And when something like that's happening, then you know that something's kind of up because it was bad. I mean, you saw it hurt Spurs in that game against, I think it was Crystal Palace, was it? Um,
Newcastle.
Newcastle, one of
Yep.
those striped jerseys, I couldn't
Yeah.
remember. Yeah, but I mean, you saw how that played out. It was just bad for the game. I know VAR is just following those rules, and the refs are just following what they're being told, but it just wasn't good for the game. A penalty should be clear and obvious. I know that's kind of gray area, but it should also it shouldn't just be we're throwing penalties out here and there because penalties, you get a free kick from 12 yards away. It's just you and the goalkeeper. So something big should have had to happen for you to earn that. And when your arm is just kind of out by your side and you didn't really mean it because you're running, I mean that's kind of tough. So I think they've done a good job walking him back, and I think it'll help the game moving forward.
Pac-12 football is coming back, Josh.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you're very excited about this. What do you think of their attempted resumption here? It's going to be quick. It's going to be condensed. Do you think there's a chance if somebody, what is it, 6 games? If somebody were to go,
6 games and then a championship game.
so
Yeah.
if someone were to go 7-0, are they going to be able to compete with the SEC who's playing 10 games, with the ACC who's trying to play 11 games? Can they make their way into the playoff?
I think there's only two teams that, if they go undefeated, will make it into the playoff, and that's Oregon and USC.
Mhm.
Outside of that, I don't think there's a chance. If California goes undefeated, I don't think they will. I don't think they're getting in. If Washington, and I'm that's coming from a big Washington fan, if they go undefeated, I doubt they're going to get in. It's just kind of how it is. And I will say this about the Pac-12: a lot of people were kind of giving them crap for taking so long to come back and canceling early, but I think, and this is, I'm going to sound really biased doing this, but they were kind of behind the eight ball in the fact that, one, the West Coast has been super conservative with how they're kind of getting back to normalcy in terms of COVID restrictions, and second, when the Big Ten was coming back and when there was talk about more conferences coming back, like the entire West Coast was on fire. Like,
Yep.
they were not in a good spot to resume practice, to get people back on the practice field. And so they took their time, and I know they're going to be one of the last leagues back, but I think they're doing it in a good way. I hope they're doing it in a safe way, because I know they wouldn't have come back if it wasn't safe for these student athletes. But hopefully the wildfires have gone away. I know there's still a few out there, but the air quality needed to come back to a normal level, and I think they did a good job taking their time, and hopefully it'll come off, and it'll be okay.
Well, and they needed government clearance too in
Right,
order
right.
to even play. I thought it was funny. I don't know if you watched the game last night. Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth wearing masks
Yeah,
in the booth. That it's kind of the world we live in. Have you had to do a game with a mask on yet?
I've not. So in our booths, I'm sitting downstairs in one of our booths, and it's basically no longer than my arms. You can't see them on the screen, but it's kind of just a small room. These are just basically for our one broadcaster productions. But upstairs, we kind of have some sort of social distancing where we have a desk kind of right in front of our TV, and then a desk like back to my right with our color commentator, and there's like a plastic shield in between us. So that's kind of our social distancing. So we don't have to wear masks, but when we're in the office walking around, definitely masks are required. But it's just kind of 2020. That's just how it works. And when I saw that for the first time, I was like, is that really a thing? Like,
Yeah,
they can't just take it off for 3 hours. They're by themselves, but
that's what
rules are
I
rules,
thought
and they're
too.
following them. I give them credit for doing so.
I feel like if it's just them in that room, you'd think they'd be all right. But
Yeah.
I had to do it the other day. We did an outdoor game at Bloomington North. Had to
Oh
have
yeah.
the
Okay.
mask on. That was I don't want to do it again. We'll just keep it at that.
Yeah.
It's
No, I don't
tough to
doubt
get
you. Yeah.
excited and catch your breath when you got a mask on for sure.
Right.
But got
Right.
to do what we got to do. Got to ask you about Seattle getting a hockey team. The
Yeah.
Kraken It's
The
coming to
Kraken.
Seattle. What are your thoughts on this?
I'm super excited about it. I'm not too big of a hockey fan
Hmm.
myself, but I will become a big hockey fan. There was kind of just like a gap in that Northwest area. I know Vancouver is just up the road, but between San Jose and Vancouver, there was nothing in between. And I think Seattle now, they don't have a basketball team anymore, of course, with the Sonics having left a while ago. But I think hockey's going to be a huge hit. There's actually two kind of lower league hockey teams just north and south of Seattle that get really good crowds. So I think the Kraken are going to be great. Um, it's pretty exciting for the city because they have, of course, the Mariners, the Seahawks, and the Sounders and the Storm. But getting a hockey team, getting that third Big Four sport back, if you will, is going to be huge. And they actually won the first Stanley Cup for an American team back a long time ago, like 100 years ago. It's the Seattle Metropolitans. So there's some hockey history in Seattle. It'll be good to have that team back, and it should be really, really fun. I'm excited to be out for a game.
Well, the Hawks are definitely carrying the mantle for Seattle. Well, I guess the Seattle Storm, but
And the Sounders, they're in first place in
the
MLS.
Sounders.
So there you go.
Russell Wilson, is he your MVP?
Absolutely. Got to let him cook. Once he's cooking, he's hard to stop. Um, I know Patrick Mahomes is fantastic. He's almost like Mike Trout in a way, where like he's going to put up MVP numbers every year. But I think Russell Wilson, he had the most touchdown passes through 3 games. They're 4-0. I mean, I'm biased, of course, but you got to let him cook and you got to give him that MVP. But there's still a lot of season left. Who knows what's going to happen? But so far, so good.
What have you thought, just a general takeaway from the resumption of sports across all leagues here in the US? Because it feels like everybody's handling it differently. Some are
Yeah,
bubbling, some are travel bubbling. And I can't believe how well the PGA Tour has worked with a traveling bubble,
yeah.
because it doesn't feel like a traveling bubble is really a bubble. But what do you think about everybody who's tried to resume, the people who've done it better than others, the people who are struggling, just your general takeaways from a
Yeah.
guy who works in a smaller soccer league?
Right. I mean, that was one of the biggest things coming back because the USL, obviously, the budget is not as big as MLS, where they can't go to Orlando for a month and do a tournament. They, I think they did a fantastic job in how they set it up, where it's basically regionalized. So there are 8 groups basically, and they're all regional groups. So all the Southern California teams, along with the Phoenix team and the Las Vegas team, they're all in like a 5-team group. Then you have kind of in the Southeast, it's Tampa Bay, Miami, Atlanta, um, and they did a good job, I think, making those groups. So one, you can take buses places. You don't have to get on a plane, where you can at least social distance within your group on a bus. I know some teams still have to take planes, and that's just kind of how it is. But I think they've done a pretty good job coming back. It was a little weird at the beginning um, just because I mean people are going to get COVID. I mean that's just kind of how it's going to work, and it's the unfortunate part of it. But if you're going to return to play, you have to know what those risks are, and the players, they accepted those risks. They put out a statement with their USLPA saying we wouldn't have come back if we didn't feel safe. So I think they've done a good job in that respect. In terms of other sports, though, obviously the bubble is the best way to do it if you can pull it off. I know it's tough on the players, but that's just kind of how it works. I think MLB, you kind of saw how that worked with the Marlins and the Cardinals. It was tough at first, but then I think once they figured things out, I mean MLB was just kind of a crapshoot all along. It was a tough season, but they got to the playoffs, and I give them credit. But like you said, the PGA Tour, I think, has been the best so far. They were the first ones to come back in pro sports. Aside from the NWSL, they were the first, I guess, team sport to come back. But I've loved watching the PGA Tour all summer long. They've done a great job with it, and I give them a lot of credit for pulling off, because they were kind of one of those last leagues or associations to stop the players. I mean, because they were like, oh, it's just golf, like you can all walk around,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not as simple as that. And we kind of found that out as we learned more and more. But they came back, and I thought they did a fantastic job.
It's crazy. They were the one of the last ones to cancel, first one to resume. They had a
Yeah,
bunch of tests weeks 2 and 3 that came back positive, and you thought they might have to cancel it. But yeah, they've done a great job. And we'll
yeah,
we'll see what happens with the NFL. I think there's a lot of concerns now
yeah,
after this last week, but I'm impressed with something like the USL that they've really bought into it. It sounds
Yeah.
like.
Yeah, and I mean it's not easy because this is a league that is a big part of their income is fans coming to games. And there's some stadiums where there are fans. It's of course limited capacity, but that's such a big part of this league is that they're in their communities. They're all community clubs basically. I mean they're MLS2 teams as well, but a lot of those teams are tied to their communities really really tightly. And not being able to have those fans in the stands that's a big loss for those teams and for those owners. And it's tough. And I give them a lot of credit for coming back and doing what they've done. But next year, it's going to be really interesting to see if they can get fans from day one. And I wonder how next season is going to look. But so far in 2020, I think they've done a really admirable job coming back. There's a lot of skepticism. Some teams have had to actually cut their season short. Loudoun United, they picked up some COVID tests and they've had to stop their season at 13 out of their 16 games. That's just kind of how it goes. It's just part of the season. But for the rest of the league, I think they've done a good job. And now we're in the playoffs. It starts on Saturday.
Well, Josh, good luck with the playoffs. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for spending some time with me. You can catch Josh Eastern on ESPN Plus, correct?
Yep,
With
all the games there. Yep.
all your USL action by ESPN Plus. You get to listen to the great Josh Eastern doing some awesome USL playoffs. So excited about that. Josh, thanks so much for spending some time with us.
Thank you very much, Austin. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for everybody for watching us or listening to us today, whether you're listening on our podcast feed on Spotify, Spreaker Podcast, or Apple Podcast, or watching on our IU Sports Media YouTube page. You can catch all of our previous 54 episodes there. If you want to see our faces or just listen to the podcast, you can do both through our two mediums. That'll wrap things up for our Monday episode. We'll be back on Wednesday. We're trying again with Kyle Porter. Hopefully he is back to health and we'll have him on Wednesday. Excited for that episode. If you're a golf fan, you should definitely tune in. We'll be talking everything golf. But that'll wrap things up for Josh Eastern. I'm Austin Render. Have a great week. We'll see you on Wednesday.